Somebody sent me this shirt. Whoever I support LNG is liquefied natural gas. So I have no problem wearing free shit. If you want to send me free shit, I'll wear it to the two people who watch this channel. So there you go. I support LNG. Fuck anybody who doesn't. Many of us want to fight for what we believe is right. But if you stop and think for a minute, that is not the highest priority. If your goal is to fight for what you believe is right, if you knew all the pertinent facts for the circumstance that you find yourself in, then the highest priority, or at least a higher priority, is to not fight on behalf of your enemy, not fight for their goals, to not fight for the forces that are against your goal or what you believe is right and true, or would believe is right and true if you only knew the whole story, if such a thing even exists. But it is clearly worse to unknowingly fight for what you hate and are against, or than what you would support if you only knew better, than to not fight at all. But I'm not arguing that we shouldn't fight. Quite the contrary. I'm arguing that, I'm trying to make clear that we should fight, but we need to be careful about what side we are on versus what side we would fight for had we known all the pertinent facts. Now, can you imagine being told someone is the enemy, who did egregious things, who deserves a fate worse than death? So you fought and you destroyed that person or that group or that people, only to find out later that they were actually the heroes of the story, and they were fighting for what you believe is true and just. But you just didn't know the whole story, or you were misled to be on the wrong side of history. This is the situation we are in. A lot of people I speak to and know are moral and want what they believe is just, but they are being played by puppet masters and are manipulated to fight for what they would otherwise see as evil, if they were not brainwashed. You could probably say this about any army in human history, but that skirts too close to assuming all humans have the same values, which we clearly do not. Some people are assholes. They know it, and honestly and truly do not care. I know a cop in the Niagara Regional Police Department who is clear-cut. He's a clear-cut example of this. This guy is not an asshole because he's a cop. He's an asshole who became a cop. And just today, I was on an on-ramp pulling onto the highway, and there was this large transport truck in front of me. And he was trying to get to speed as fast as he could. But he was clearly very heavy. And that engine in that truck was just straining. And the skank behind me was clearly irritated by me not getting to speed, despite there being a giant semi-truck directly in front of me. So when we got to the point on the highway when we could merge onto it, she pulled out and was kissing my bumper and was clearly going to pull up behind the truck, past me, and try to pull up next to behind the truck and block my access onto the highway, forcing me to go into the ditch. Right? So I pulled out. I kept my spot in line. So despite this being a 3-lane highway and there being other lanes open, she was just right there. So she pulled right out on my bumper. I pulled out too, and I was on the truck's bumper, and I would have run out of lane, and the ramp was ending. So despite me not having anywhere else to go, this skank was furious and pulled into the middle lane and pulled up next to me and gave me a stink eye before hammering it and pulling away, right? The reason why I'm bringing her up is because her total lack of situational awareness to the situation everyone else was in. She just wanted to get quick, get on the highway and fuck everyone else, that's in her way, right? Just my owning my position in line was sufficient to piss this skank off to no end. How dare I not drive into the ditch so she could pull up behind the truck, right? I get the feeling that she's an asshole, and she knows it, and she just doesn't care. So we can't dismiss the notion that people have different values. Some people try to not be assholes, while others try to be assholes and identify proudly as assholes. Assholes having many definitions, of course, right? There are people who want to fight, not even for what's best for them, but just for what's worse for others, like that uptight, bumper grinding skank from this morning. And that one Niagara Regional police officer that I know who proudly self-identifies as an asshole. And you know who you are. That type of person is a different ball of wax than the majority of people who I'm talking about. Those who want to fight for what they believe is right and have values I hesitate to call Christian values, the values that benefit one's tribe, one's neighborhood, versus the selfish garbage who run through the parking lot to get to the restaurant before you so they can get ahead of you in the line for a table. Right? We've all seen that. Oh, the old coots, scurrying. They've never walked that fast before in their life. Yes, it's a gradient, and we all have selfish predispositions, but some of us stop there, while others have the magnanimous traits of benefiting the tribe. Magnanimous being an interesting word. Magnus means, of course, great, and animus meaning full of life. Magnanimous meaning greatness of spirit, and the antithesis of selfish. The ancients were much smarter than we give them credit for. The people who came up with this word magnanimous. I'm assuming are the Latins, the Greeks, the Italians. I know a lot of people who are selfish garbage, and they are most susceptible to conditioning through fear. I think because the thing they fear most is their personal discomfort, or perhaps even someone else just getting ahead of them, which is very base. This vulnerability, due to lack of magnanimity, may be used to justify the oppression of such lost souls by the evil that may be orchestrating such deceptions. Brainwashing your enemies to fight against their own kind, against what would be in their best interests, is a genius strategy. And their tactics to achieve that target vulnerabilities of character. People often may think, if I'm not moral, then no one else is moral. And when they come across a moral person, they think they are faking it, like a psychopath who thinks no one else cares about anyone else, and anyone who appears to care about anyone else is clearly faking it. Personally, I'm a bit of both. There are people who I care about and others who I would be happy to see dead, and still others who I couldn't care less if they live or die, right? So I think we all hold different values in these traits. That's probably where the word value comes from. How much value do you have in that little graph, right? Of that specific trait. What's the value? Your value's 7, your value's 10? I don't know. We sometimes hear the lone wolf yelling to the crowd, "We are not each other's enemies. They are pitting us against each other." And those lone wolves are obviously right. But why doesn't the critical mass of the masses grab onto that and take notice of the orchestration, lying, and manipulation coming from the sources of propaganda in our society? Specifically, why don't they take notice? Specifically, why they don't take notice is the vulnerability. I think that they're being targeted, if I get that words out right. We hear it all the time by kooks yelling, "Wake up, people," because these kooks who do see it don't get why the masses are so blind to it and why it's so obvious to them. I'm still impressed with the brilliance of pitting people against themselves. The closest metaphor would be an ideological cancer. Condition girls to hate their fathers. Down with the patriarchy. Of course, there are some asshole parents out there who deserve to be, fought against. But I would argue the majority are not. But who would have always wanted children to be taken from their parents and raised by the state? The evil, subhuman, garbage Marxists. 2 minutes of observation of any university campus in the West would clearly demonstrate that today's youth are conditioned to destroy our society from within. So who would want to destroy our society in the first place? Those who are not of our society, those who are alien to our society. And they are easy to detect. Anyone who preaches hatred toward Western values or against Western society, anyone who hates white people, anyone who targets benevolent values, anyone who hates freedom, anyone who hates independence, anyone who hates logic, reason, math, and instead promotes collectivism and centralization. The good people may be harder to detect, as they are stereotypically the silent majority, but they generally promote decentralization and trust the logic of good finding a way by diverse opinions that are held up against the feedback of objective reality. But that cannot happen in an opaque box of censorship. It needs the light to be alive, the luminous for the animus. So in this class of our fellow tribe who are actively fighting against us, like a cancer, there would be divided into subclasses. Those who are unwitting, useful idiots to the antagonistic evil that is bent on destroying our society, and the assholes who know better, who are knowingly and secretively fighting to bring about the destruction of our society. I would think that there's also no redemption for this class of knowing assholes. But for the sheep who have been brainwashed, who just don't know any better, there may be redemption for some. The realization before it's too late that you may be fighting for your enemy is a powerful antipsychotic, where the psychosis is an impaired relationship with reality. We can't totally blame them, as the tactics of the manipulators are very advanced and quite potent, but not omnipotent, omnipotent. For the fighter class of human, our first priority should be questioning, are we the bad guys? Who are we fighting for? Do we have all the information, or are we being manipulated yet again to believe X are our enemy, when in fact X may be the good guys, or at least not the bad guys, they just might be the other guys, but just the targets of the day for the sociopathic elite who get off on killing thousands of innocent people. It's truly a game for that class of evil. I know sheep who have good morals, but have somehow been conditioned to believe that they have no power, that they should lay low to keep their heads down, falsely believing that not fighting back is somehow a winning strategy. That is clearly insane. There is always hope. And the fact that I've been warned by both people I know and strangers to stop talking about this shit, or else I will be killed, is evidence that talking about it is somehow a valid threat. Otherwise, why would they want me to stop talking about it? It's not like I even have an audience. So arguing it is futile to take to wake the sheep up while simultaneously claiming that you will be killed implies that it is not futile. It needs to be repeated until it is crystal clear. Speaking up is a powerful tool. We as a society need an immune system against the dark arts of manipulation. And the simplest one that Mother Nature has given us is calling out the bullshit clearly and loudly for all to hear, like that guy in Elf singing the songs, right? The emperor has no clothes. We must all ask ourselves if we are an unwitting agent provocateur for some evil agenda. A major problem I see is that when we've been brainwashed through strong emotional content, usually fear or anger or both, we bypass our reasoning faculties in our brains. We bypass reasoning. So if we didn't use reason to get to where we are, we have to use a different mode of thinking to get ourselves out of this mess, which is easy, but you have to consciously decide to do it and then to start doing it. Questioning things, listening to arguments of your perceived enemies, watching out for logical fallacies, mostly blind assertions, and emotional content as the modus operandi. Operandi? My experience, as well as those of authors long dead, is that it is much harder to try to reason someone away from their illogical position, especially if they were conditioned with fear and anger to be in that position in the first place. They have to decide themselves, and quite frankly, most people are fucking idiots. I'm no exception. I've done complete idiotic things, and I've been wrong more times than I would like to admit. But I've made the choice to not drink the Kool-Aid, to not drink it blindly at least. And when I ask, how do you know? Most of the time, they have no answer. Can we use fear and emotion to break our fellow sheep out of the trance? Why would Mother Nature design us to have this flaw in the first place? This flaw of being so susceptible to being a useful idiot sheep? Is this some artifact that was bred into us, into our slave ancestors? And before you freak out, every people on the planet has been enslaved at one point or another. But anyone who's bred bees or plants or anything genetically knows that without constant attention and control, it may only take a generation or two to revert to the mean, to revert to the feral state, to the state where the unnaturally amplified traits are lost to the animal or plant. And it goes pretty back to what it was before our modifications. So I suppose given enough time, dogs in the wild would morph back into wolf-like creatures with bigger snouts, which makes sense, as I don't see the little disgusting yappy dogs surviving for long in the wild. So perhaps the dissidents who are calling out the slavery of our minds are just the dogs who are reverting back to a more feral human state from before the mind slavery of the so-called elite class over the power of the masses. There are those who are not only aware of this phenomenon, but they use it daily against us. And then there are the idiot sheep who don't believe the manipulation even exists. The ones who don't think your cell phone actually listens to you, or that they are somehow superhuman and immune to it because they are so special. Those who would be the true genetic throwbacks to our past slavery, doomed to death, they fear the most, or in this case, even worse, as they are the antagonistic cancer against what they would fight for if they only knew.